Hello and welcome to the second of 3 FESPA webinars in association with Esko, which is based on print workflow. My name is Karosh Farhadi and I am the FESPA organizer for this webinar, and I would like to welcome you all to today's session. Today's webinar, which is based on workflow on how it can revolutionize your business, will be presented by Russell Weller. Russell is the European and UK application sales manager for Esko. Russell has also been working within the graphics industry for 15 years, is an expert in PDF workflows and pre-flight technologies and software tools. He has leading knowledge on he is a leading knowledge resource and evangelist for business and pre-press integration of wide format markets. And he has been working in Esko, who have been developing software tools, workflow systems, and 3D design tools to ensure that you remain competitive in the 21st century. A few housekeeping rules prior to Russell taking over, which are that all attendees will remain muted. If you have any questions that you would like to pose to Russell, we will answer them in the Q&A at the end of the session. You can also post these questions in the chat or the questions section in your control panel. And everyone who has attended this Esko webinar will receive a free 3-month iCut software suite, which we will send you the details after this webinar has been completed. I will now be handing it over to Russell, who will begin his presentation using the iCut software.
Thank you, Karosh. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second part of the iCut Suite presentation. This afternoon, we're going to be focusing on automation engine and on workflow automation. But before I do that, I'd just like to touch on briefly the 2 points that we touched on in the previous first session. Hopefully, some of you were able to attend that. Before we do that, I'd just like to thank you for your time this afternoon and for attending, and hopefully we'll make it as interesting as possible. And any questions, please, at the end of the session, we can have a Q&A session. So my name is Russell Weller. I'm the application sales manager for the software for the large format market. Just to formally introduce Esko, if nobody's ever heard or seen of Esko before, we are a software and hardware development and manufacturing company for all aspects of print. And previously mentioned today, we're going to be focusing on the large format and in particular on automation for the large format market. Now, I do have a live presentation to show today, but just before I move on, I just wanted to start with a presentation on a previous slide that we showed 2 weeks ago, just to for continuity. Hopefully, everybody can see my screen okay. So previous session we ran was on the iCut pre-flight and on the iCut layout. 2 interactive editors. The iCut pre-flight is a high-end PDF editing solution, allows you to get deep inside of that PDF file and make last-minute amends, but also there's some features in there specific for this market, such as cut path generation, bleed generation, so clicks of buttons, we can make it a print-ready file. The second part of that presentation was on iCut layout, again an interactive layout tool. Works perfectly with your output print devices, but of course also with digital finishing tables. Again, just some highlights there. You can see we can nest interactively on irregular shapes. We can obviously do tiling, and again, get the files out down to the output devices as quickly as possible. The session today, highlighted there in the bigger letters, you can see is on the iCut Automate part, which is a module embedded into our automation engine. And what that will allow you to do is automate the 2 parts that you can see there and linking it through into a business system. So just a couple of highlights that you can see there. Create dynamic workflows to standardize and automate. Dynamic will mean make workflows that fit your specific business. Avoiding double entries by linking it through to your MIS business system. so we can take information from that to use to drive the workflows and drive the files through that particular system. Increase productivity, of course, that's what we're trying to do here, get the files that are delivered down to the output devices as quickly and automated as possible. Nice big plus point, improve order to cash cycle. It's obviously a big plus point here. And obviously free up capacity to explore new avenues. So whether you're just in a 2D environment right now, obviously you're spending a lot of time to prepare those files, free up some time to maybe explore through into the 3D environment while allowing an automated system to take care of the previous task that you're currently doing. Just to go into a little bit more detail, just to, again, an overview of where we are with the iCut suite. The pre-flight and layout, you can see there, PDF files in. The idea here is to obviously prep them, get them laid out as quickly as possible, and send a layout graphic file down to whichever output device, whether it's a roll device, a flatbed device, but also a relevant cutting file down to the relevant cutting tables, of course, a Kongsberg table that we have within inside of our portfolio. So based on obviously pre-flighting and ripping, auto reporting that we can generate from the pre-flight, and obviously also editing of the file. Nesting, whether it's irregular shapes, squared up, again in a guillotine environment, or of course we can take large graphics, tile them with very simple clicks of buttons and get them again down to the output devices as quickly as possible. Generation of marks is very simple for us, so whatever type of mark that you need to add onto that graphic, whether that's for the camera registration system, barcodes for registering the cutter with the graphics, again very simple for us. And two really nice features that you can see there, create cut path and create bleed. Again, this is automated things that we can do here now. So what are we going to focus on today? So that was the focus from 2 weeks ago. Today we're going to focus on the automation side. So everything that we've just explored just then, how can we automate this? How can we link it to a system that's sitting in front of the pre-press? And how can we get the files down to the next stage? It could be the output devices, the finishing, maybe even just sending a low-res proof to the client to gain approval before we go down to the next stage. So there you'll see a very nice graphic of how we can actually start making these particular flows dynamic and bespoke for your particular business. But again, we'll explore that in a little bit more detail very shortly. A couple of benefits there. Of course, the first one is it improves your pre-press efficiency. It's taking a lot of those tasks that you're having to do today and sending them through to a server-based solution that's going to automate for you. Reduce errors and lead times. Of course, that's very important. And delivering the correct files down to the right locations first time, every time. Again, extremely important. So I'd like to leave the PowerPoint there. I did promise I won't go too much on the PowerPoints today, and I'd like to take you through to actually a live presentation. It will be high level, and again, if there's any questions, then please ask at the end, and I will ask the questions as we answer them as we go through the Q&A session. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at the interface into the server-based solution. So this will allow you to actually link into the system, see statuses of where your jobs are, whether that's from an account manager, whether that's from the pre-press department. So this now gives you an overview of exactly where your files are, the status of your files, wherever they are within inside of that process or wherever they are within inside of your business. And how can we do that? Well, the first thing that we can do is we can link it through to your MIS business system. So we have a database, a job concept that sits inside of the automation engine, iCut Automate solution. And that allows us, if we look at a job card here that's live on my system, it allows me to actually take information and populate the database of our system. So that could be something as simple as a job number, as a due date that you could see there. It could be the customer. So if I wanted to make a low resolution proof to send back to the client, I need to know their email address. I'm dealing with 1,000 clients. Obviously, I need to be able to extract that from some system. If you have it inside of your business system, we can reuse that data time and time again. And again, it could be relevant information that's for your business. Here you can see that I'm looking at things like a job number. I'm looking at the quantity. In this instance, it could be that I take one file. I know my sheet size. It's an 8x5 sheet, and I just want to fill it with as many that it can fit on that particular sheet as possible. Or it could be individual quantities per item. Again, we can handle that in a very smart way. Substrates are a very important one here because we can do mixed sheets. So if you have lots of files coming from lots of different locations, we can start making sure that the right jobs are laid out onto the right substrate, and we can start mixing the sheets again before they go down to the relevant location. So here you can see immediately we can start extracting information and assigning it to the job that sits inside of the automation engine system. But that's the first stage. We then need to be able to automate the system. So how do we do that? Well, again, built into Automation Engine, and hopefully everybody can see my system and it's updating for you okay, we have the ability to start making the dynamic workflows. And this is what I mean by the bespoke system. It's a canvas, it's a non-linear workflow solution. So you build a workflow that fits your specific needs. So this is a workflow that works in my environment. It's going to take irregular shapes and square shapes and nest them for best sheet optimization, but doing lots of other stages along the way as well. So if we just explore exactly what this is doing before we launch some files. So the first thing is we're going to submit some files to this particular flow. And that could be submitting it from a hot folder. It could be that somebody launches it from within inside the pilot that I'll show you. Or it could even be that we go and collect that from an FTP. I then want to check to see what file type that I'm dealing with. Of course, not everybody's just dealing with PDFs. So it could be that we want to take in InDesign files, PostScript files, Illustrator files, PDFs, etc. So we can get the system in an intelligent way to work out exactly what to do with that particular file, depending on a lot of parameters. And that could be a parameter that's inside the file, or it could be a parameter that sits inside of the MIS job system. Immediately what I want to do there is create a PDF. So that's the first thing the system's going to do for me. If it is a PDF, we'll just work with the file that it is. And then I want to pre-flight. I want to check. So immediately I receive the file, I submit it to my workflow solution, and I want to check to make sure that it conforms to my compatibility of my business. Are there RGBs? Are there low-res images? Is there missing fonts? So immediately I receive the file, within seconds, I can see if I'm going to have a problem later on down the line. So that's the first thing this is going to do. Nobody has to do this. It's just a case of submitting files. I can then start making decisions on exactly how I start reporting those errors. Now, in this instance, I'm just going to report back to the person who submitted the file. But I just wanted to show you how simple it is to make a change to this particular flow and customize it for a particular need. You may want to actually send it on somewhere, so back to the client, back to the agency. So I can then make a decision here to put an email gateway and email it back to the relevant location of where that report needs to be checked. So here you can see the customization and the bespoke ability of how you can start changing these particular workflows. So moving through, once that report has been corrected, we can then start moving it through into the optimization stage of the process. And what's this going to allow me to do? Well, let's just open up one of these particular configuration windows here that you can see. I won't go through everything here today, but just pick on one of these items here. Maybe every file that enters my business, I want to turn it into a PDF immediately. I want to pre-flight it, but what I also want to do is ensure that all of my live text is vectorized. So when it goes down to the output, the RIP, or wherever it needs to go, I'm not going to have a problem with fonts later on down the line. So this is what we mean by repetitive tasks automated on a server-based solution, and it's doing the same thing every single time for you. So that's the first stage of how we can handle the PDF process and taking it and making sure that that's a corrected PDF. We can then start doing a lot more with the file to prepare to make sure that it is a print ready and getting it nested for the later on down the stages. So what's the next stage I want to do? Well, in this instance, I want to check to see if there's a cutter file available for me. It could be a multi-part display that I'm dealing with. It could be an irregular shape, or of course, it could just be a squared up. But if I'm going to a digital converting finishing table, of course, I need to make sure that there's a cutter file available. So if there is one, why redo the work again? Let's just work with it. If there isn't one, inside the system, and this comes back to the couple of slides on the presentation that I showed you, we can actually start getting the system to create me a cut path on the fly inside of the workflow. And we can do that in a number of ways. We can either just trace around the object itself, create a cut path, and I'll show you that working live, or we can just make it around a squared up and actually make a cut path to a squared up shape. Notice here as well, we can also create bleed. And this is doing full pixel cloning. So if a client, an agency supplies you a file, there's no bleed on there, no longer do you have to expand the image and blow it up and it actually change the size of the file. We can clone bleed automatically onto that file for you. I want to put a check to make sure the pre-press operator is happy with what the system's done. And then I want to start making low-res proofs to send to the client. So I've taken my files in designs, illustrators, PDFs. I've optimized them, I've checked them, I've made cut paths, I've added bleed, and then I'm going to make a low-res proof, add some information from my MIS system, job number, information about the job, etc., and then send it immediately straight down to the client for approval, all from me just submitting one file or a multiple set of files. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that to be approved, I'm going to send it down for the layout and imposition stages. So the next stage is to work out exactly how we want to lay this file out, all these multiple sets of files. So the first instance is to work out the quantity. So we can start taking information, how many up is it, does it just want to fill the sheet, the scaling, so we've got, of course, we can start working on scaling factors, and of course, is there a front and a back, so we can start making sure that the graphics back up immediately. And then it's through to the last stage of the process in this particular workflow, which is then going to go and lay out my particular files. Notice we can start putting in substrate information, so dye bonds, Foamex, whether it's on corrugated, maybe it's going to go down to for a roll to roll, so we can put in that particular banner material that you're working with. We can take sheet sizes through, and then from there we can then start generating the relevant graphic file to go down to the output device, and also a multitude of different cutting files that you can see here. iCut, if it's going down to our Kongsberg tables, HPGL if it's going down to an external cutting table, and also a JDF SIP4 file if you wanted to start working with a conventional guillotine. It's all available to you inside of the system. So you'll see here how simple it is to make the workflow, how easy it is to make and edit the workflow, but also how automated that task will be specific for your particular needs. Let me just take one other workflow before I submit my actual files. And again, just a bit more of a simple workflow here, but again, just to show you how simple or complex they can be for you. But the first stage, again, is going to be a pre-flight, but in this instance, they're always going to be PDF files. I'm going to go through the prepare stage, but in this instance, we have another task open to us, and that's a create tiles task. So in this instance, it's not a small format file that we're going to lay out, it's actually a large format file that we're going to nest, and then obviously, again, create a graphic file for the output device, and also a cutting file to go down to the relevant cutting device. So once we've made these workflows, once we're happy, once we've tested and made sure that they're right for my business and they're doing everything that I need to do, that's our job done. The workflows are there, they're set, and they're going to work every single time the right way for my particular needs. So we then come on to how we actually start submitting the files. So if I can imagine here, I'm an operator. I want to start pushing some files through the system. First of all, I want to take my job that's been created. I talked about how we can do this from a business system, an MIS system. So here, the use case could be that you've created a proposal, a quote inside of there. When that turns into a job, it automatically creates me a job inside of our pre-press workflow solution, which has happened here, created today, 97598, cutting it close job. Inside of there, I will have my folder structure. So I've now got my relevant information about my job. I've got my workflow that's been created that fits my specific needs for my output devices or for my particular client. That's all set up for me. The only thing I'm now missing are the files that are going to be delivered. I can just come back onto my desktop here, and you'll see I'm working in a very familiar way. I've just got a set of folders. Here are my files that I'm going to submit into my workflow, and here is my job that's sitting on side of the automation engine. It's just a folder, but assigned to that is a lot of information about that particular job. So let's upload these files and send them to my server-based solution. That's all I have to do. So they've been supplied to me. I've uploaded them into a predefined folder that's been created. But just before I submit them, if I could just show you a couple of files of what they are. So I have a large graphic here, a large banner. You can see the size. It's 3.5 meters by 1 meter. I can obviously tile this down as a wall graphic or a window graphic. So I want to automate the tiling side. And I also just have some wacky shapes that I want to go and nest. One problem you see here, there's no cut path on there, there's no bleed. It's only going to use the trim box of the file for nesting, so all of this white space around the edge is going to be wasted. That's an expensive material that's going to cause me a problem. But I want to nest that also with other types of shapes. And here you can see that this is, again, another shape here. But you'll see this particular time, if I just zoom in, some kind person has created me a cut path. So it's not necessarily all the files have to be the same. We can submit a multitude of different files with different parameters and different configurations, and ask the system to work out what to do with them. So what do I now have? Well, inside of my system, we talked about the job, and let's just quickly familiarize ourselves with that again. Here's my job with my relevant information and exactly how it needs to be laid out and who to send the files to. Inside of my job now, I've just uploaded my files, and here are my graphic files. In this instance, I'm working just with PDFs, but of course, I mentioned we could also work with native files, such as obviously Illustrator, InDesign, or even with PostScript files that we can start automating. So what do I now do? It's just a simple task now of actually pushing this through into my workflow. So let me just check my setting. So here's my workflows that I've pre-built. And in this instance, down the right-hand side, I've just got 3, but you can obviously create as many or as little that fits your particular needs as possible. So the first 3 here are irregular shapes that need nesting. So let's go to the workflow that we've just explored. This is the workflow that I want my files to go through, and these are the files here that I want to submit to that particular workflow, and ask the system to take care of all of it for me. I hit launch, and immediately you can see the server is now kicking off. So I'm sitting on my pre-pressed workstation, sitting on my Macintosh, my PC, or wherever I'm sitting. I've pushed it immediately to my server-based solution. I can be getting on with something else while this is taking care and actually pre-flighting and going through the stages that it needs to go through. And here you'll see, if I look at my stages, exactly the stages that these are running through and the state of where we are on side of those files and on side of those jobs. So what has it done for me? Well, immediately you can see that those files have gone through a pre-flight report. And what's it done for me? Well, it's actually created me a report. So it's gone through an error. It's checked to see if they're ready and can actually go through a configuration set for me. And here, if we have a quick look, it's actually now identifying back to me, because I was the one that submitted those files, that there's an error. It needs to do something on those particular files. So let's have a quick look at what that error is. We look back on my job setup and inside of my file, the error that it's found, let's have a quick look. Ah, fantastic. So now we're generating a full report from me just submitting those files to the system. Here you can see that it's found an RGB, the resolution of the images below what I can handle, and of course the spot color inside of the cutter file is also set up correctly for me. So I can have a report generated, sent wherever I need to send that report, and then go down to the next stage of that particular flow as we're looking at it. Now let's just bring you back the attention to the workflow, just so you can see what's happening. Here you can see here are my files, and these are the files that have gone through the pre-press, and they're the ones that have actually failed. What can I do with these now? Well, I don't want to have to keep resubmitting them once I have any failures. So what I can do here is I can just submit them and accept the errors on my pre-flight report. They disappear from my dashboard view because that's my job done, and it's now going to go down to the next stage of the particular flow. In this instance, it's going to send a low res to the customer. It's going to go down to the nesting. But of course, it's not just the small format files that I have. I also had that large format that I needed to tile. So let's have a look at the large format file, which is this one here. I have a separate workflow which is doing my tiling for me. Very easy again. I select my workflow that's been pre-built for me. I select my file and I launch. What's this going to do? It's going to go through a pre-flight. It's going to go through a check for me, and it's going to go through the stages that I needed to go through that particular workflow. So that's just running at this moment in time. While that's just running, let's just take a look at the proof that's been generated for me. Fantastic. So here's the file that we've looked at. I'll just do a zoom in here. And I just scroll down to the bottom. Here you'll see what it's done for me. It's actually taken some information. Hopefully you can see that on my screen if I just try and zoom in a bit further for you. Here you can actually see the information that's been added on. So it's taken an off-proof panel. It's added the relevant information about my job, the due dates, today's date, the operator, who's it for. So for me, just submitting that PDF, it's pre-flight checked it, it's edited that particular file, it's made sure it's print ready. It's then gone through a pre-flight stage to make sure that it's going to be okay for print purposes, and it's also sent that proof directly onto my customer. But in the meantime, what else has it done? Well, if we see here on my checklist, you can see the file that was submitted without the cut path, it's now gone and actually corrected that file for me. So let's have a quick look to make sure that we're okay with this. If you remember this file from about 10 minutes ago, there was no cut, no bleed. If I now zoom in on a particular area, and let's have a zoom in over here, you'll see exactly what that's done for me now. It's traced around the edge of the object. It's made me a cut path immediately within inside the server-based solution, and it's also added the bleed, expanded it, and got a file ready for me to send to the next stage, which is to send this on to the customer for approval. So you can see the different tasks, the different stages, everything that's going on within inside the system is immediately reported back to either the operator, it could be back to an account manager, or it could just be sending notifications on to the agency, the customer, or whoever you needed that to be at that moment in time. So here's my large format banner. Again, there's an error, but let's just accept this particular error so we can go down to the next stage. And let's see what's going on now within inside my workflow, just so you can see what's going on. You don't have to do this in an environment, but just to show you. Here's my workflow on the actual banner, just to see the file processing through. So here it goes. My file came in here, it pre-flighted, it reported back to me that there was an error. I accepted that error once I checked it. It's prepared the graphic to allow for bleed. It's created tiles on that particular graphic for me. It's set the parameters on that, and then it's going to go through into a nesting stage, make my cut paths for me, and send them to the relevant locations, whether that's the output device, whether that's the RIP, or of course that could always be the digital finishing table as well with that particular cut path. So there would just be generating my files. So they'll be generating, here they go. So let's have a quick look at the end result that we're receiving here. If you remember, the initial file that I opened was a full out 3.5 meter by 1 meter panel. I wanted to tile it to go down to my digital output device that fitted it. What's it done for me? Well, if we zoom in here, we can see exactly what it's done. It's added the bleed, fantastic. It's created the marks and added the relevant marks on for me. It's made a cut path for the exact size. And if we come over here, you can also see it's added a barcode on there, so we can see the registration between the graphics and the actual cut path, so we can make sure that we're looking at the relevant and the right files. And I have my first tile ready to go. But of course, I wanted to tile that 10 times. So here's my individual PDFs. There's tile number 2. I've just rotated it around so you can see the difference. Here's tile number 3, etc., etc., etc. So for me, just submitting a large banner, it's corrected it. It's made a low res to go to the customer for approval. It's tiled it. It's added bleed on. It's made the cut path for me. It's added all of my marks that I need for my digital devices, and it's sent them straight down to the relevant devices that I'm actually working with inside of my business. What's it also done for me is it's also made me a cut path. I can't open that because it's a .cut file, but I'll open one in a second for you. But there you'll see that that's made a cutter file directly for a Kongsberg table or any system that's running the iCut Vision Pro. So I also have my relevant cutter files ready to go as well. So what can I do here? Well, I can approve these files here. These files have been sent to my client. So these are my smaller files now that need nesting. I've done my tile job. That's all automated. It's all happened for me. It's all got down to the relevant locations. And from here, for my smaller files, again, I can submit them. The customers approve them for me, and I can go down to the next stages of my particular flow. And again, the cycle can then just keep continuing. If you needed to, you could just keep resubmitting the files. You could receive new files using exactly the same workflow. Again, I can keep submitting these particular files. If they're different files, it doesn't matter. But again, I'm reusing the work that's been done with inside of that flow, reusing the data that's come through from my MIS system, and utilizing all that information with inside. But again, you'll see the speed. You'll see how quickly these files are processing. Again, just to show you, if I accepted them so you can see what's happening, if I accept and proceed, immediately they go down to the next stage. And again, if we just watch these files going through, you can see the speed of actually how they're processing through. So here's my file here that didn't have a cutter or bleed. Here's my files that did, and immediately I'm generating. So I'm always making sure that there's processes going on to optimize the productivity, to make sure that those files are getting down to the output devices as quickly as possible. So this is now creating the cut path and the bleed that I've already showed you. But again, I just wanted to show you the speed and how this is doing it. So that's already done that for me. It's already created the cut path. It's already created the bleed. But notice here that these are sitting here waiting. What are they waiting for? Well, they're waiting for this file, which is its friend, all to do with that particular same job, to go and meet up with it. So this is where the intelligence of the job management system comes in. So I know that these 10 files over here need to be fused and laid out with these 10 files over here. So let's accept these again so you can see the stages that's going through from a workflow concept. I accept them. It sets the parameters in this instance, which is the quantity. It collects all of the files together, and then it sends them down to, and if I zoom in to see what's going on here, the actual nesting. So I'm actually asking all of the systems to do this for me. In the meantime, my email is being sent, but likewise here as well, it's actually nesting those files. It's going to create a nested layout for me, and it's also going to create the relevant cutting file. Again, if we just watch that to see the speed. So this is taking an 8x4, 1220, 2440 sheet. It's nesting those 3 files for me. It's doing a duplex, so it's doing a front and a back, and it's creating all of the relevant cut files from that as it's doing it. Again, in the meantime, obviously that's sending an email for me as well. So here, that outlines the process of the files. Again, that flow can look exactly as you need it to look, specific for your business and bespoke for your particular business, but there's no right or wrong way of these files actually going through your pre-press department. It's whatever fits your needs, and obviously gaining productivity to get them through the system as quickly and automated as possible. So that's just saving out that file for me. Again, you can see this is happening live for you. So that's just now just nesting the last part of the actual files. That will send it down to the next stage of the flow, which will be the actual graphic files and the cutters that will process through those actual files and generate me obviously the cutters, whether that's obviously a squared up or whether that's an irregular shape as well. So what can we do from that once we've generated these files? Well, the first thing is, because we're linked to an MIS system, you may want to start sharing the data that's given to the MIS system, to the pre-press automation. We can start sharing that data back. So we call that bidirectional. So if you've given us information, it'd be nice for us to be able to give you statuses back. Is the file complete? Has it nested correctly? Maybe the quantity, how many on the sheet has it managed to fit on? How many sheets do you need to print to get your desired quantity? All this sort of information would be nice to be able to actually send back to a business system. Again, we can do that. We're not just a one direction here. We're talking sending information back. So just while I was explaining that part, that's now finished my layout file. What's that done for me? Let's have a quick look here. Fantastic. So here's my graphic file. You can see I've asked it to lay it out any order on my sheet. So this is really now doing some irregular shape nesting. It's not taking the trim box, so I'm really getting the best usage out of that particular sheet. You can see some nice nesting going on here. And what else has it done for me? It's also created a back. So in this instance, it's going to be a front and a back. So we can guarantee to you that those graphics are in the right location on the sheet, nested, optimized with all of the relevant files on there as well. What else has it made for me? It's made me a cutting file. Let me just go and open up the cutting file for you. So here's my cutting file. So just to show you where that's come from. So here it is here. What's the cutter file look like? Fantastic. So that's actually now taken away my graphics. The actual sandwich here that you saw it create a cutter, it's using that with inside of there. And that is now a cutter that can go down to, again, the cutting table or down to a guillotine if we're working in a squared up environment. And again, get them down to the relevant locations. So hopefully that's a very high level view of an automated system. But that gives you hopefully an indication of how we can take information from a business system or from other locations, drive it through a fully automated system that's been developed specifically for the large format market, drive all of the output devices, making sure that the files are print ready, making sure that the low reses have been sent to the customer for approval and gaining the approval on those files, going through the different nesting, the different layouts and the different tiling stages that we can now automate, and generating and sending down the files to the relevant locations that we need to send those files down to. I'd like to end the presentation there. I'd like to open up now for any questions. I'm just having a quick look now, see if there's any questions come open through the presentation. I see not, but I don't know whether there's any questions out there now. Karosh, can you open up the fields for questions, please?
Yep. There is a couple here that I have. One of them is in regards to the iCut software. I was wondering what type of support I can receive. I think they mean what kind of technical support they can receive for the iCut software. What is there available at hand?
Okay, great question. Yep. So not only are we a software development company, but obviously we also have services available inside of Esko as well. And what I mean by services is that's installation, training on the products, because what you're looking at there is obviously a big workflow solution that's going to obviously enhance your business. So we need to make sure that we're offering a solution that's going to help you do that. So that's the first part of the service that we can offer you, is to help you get it up and running and making sure you're getting the best out of the system. The second part is an ongoing support. It's all wrapped up into a maintenance contract, and part of that will be ongoing upgrades, because of course software moves forward very quickly, so we can keep making sure you're up to date with the relevant upgrades, but also a full telephone support. So there's always somebody there at the end of the telephone that again can help you out to make sure that we fix any issues that you come up against, but again to make sure that you're moving that particular solution forwards in the right direction.
Fantastic, thank you for that. Another question we had was, I can see that you can import flows and images into the iCut software, but after editing them, can you move them back into Illustrator? So what I suppose is that since we've obviously seen images being imported into the iCut software and being able to be manipulated from there within the workflow, I believe that they want to see if they can manipulate it and then take the image back, or the entire workflow back into Illustrator.
That's fine. Yeah, we can do that. So we work in a normalized and a native environment. So what I mean by that is you can turn it into a proprietary Esko file format. It's still based on the PDF format, or you can keep the file as a native PDF. What does that mean and why I'm explaining that? If it's a normalized file that we turn it into a PDF, we have a plugin into Illustrator that now allows you to take that file back in and keep all of the editing capabilities within inside of that file. Same again with a native PDF, of course, you could open that directly back into Illustrator and do the same. So the answer is yes, you can do that.
Marvelous. I believe that is all the questions that we have had come through today. One other question that I would have is there any other kind of advice or anything else that you could provide the attendees today on other ways or other practices and methods that can help them revolutionize their workflow process for the print industry with the iCut software? Is there anything at hand that you would think would be a quick win that could really benefit everyone?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, the quick wins, as we call it, would be the iCut suite, the iCut pre-flight and iCut layout, the interactive software. So that is a very quick win. And why it's a quick win is it's a simple piece of software to work with. And if you just take the pre-flight, what that allows you is it brings the ability back inside of your business to be able to edit that PDF very, very quickly. So rather than being reliant on the agency, the designer to be able to do that, you can do that yourself. But also make sure that that file is correct. So that's a really quick win. It's a simple piece of software. It's available on a download from our website. So you can trial it. It's a full production piece of software. That is a really quick win. The layout, again, it's an interactive layout piece of software. It's available as a download and as a trial. And again, rather than sitting there manually trying to work out how many quantities you can get on a sheet, somebody then comes back and asks you to change that. Again, there's a fully automated system that you can just click buttons and it will just go and lay that out on the sheet for you. So from a quick win point of view, that's where we have the interactive applications. Of course, moving up from there, quick wins would be trying to educate, obviously, the agencies, your customers, to ensure that the file that's being delivered to you is as optimized as possible. It's a PDF, the fonts are available for you, it's the relevant resolution inside the images, etc. So again, from a quick win, it's a lot about education back upstream before receiving those particular files that you're receiving.
Right. Well, thank you very much for answering my question as well, Russell. Well, that's everything that we have for our webinar today. I would like to thank everyone that took part in our webinar and for attending it. I would also like to thank you, Russell, for joining us today to present the second part of our three-part series in the webinar series for Esko on workflow and how it can revolutionize your business. And I would also like to point out that the 3-month iCut software suite package will be sent, the details for the package will be sent to all of the attendees today so that they have a 3-month subscription free of charge. And if you would like to view any of these, this webinar video or any of the other webinar videos in association with Esko, they will be on demand shortly at FESPA.com, which is www.fespa.com. So thank you very much once again for attending, and we look forward to you attending our last in our webinar series with Esko, which will take place in 2 weeks. All the relevant information for this webinar will also be available on FESPA.com. And thank you, one and all. Goodbye.